I've gone through and casted all the Batman characters and the actors to line up an Under the Red Hood live action film, but it just wouldn't seem right to stop there. I mean, of course Red Hood would make an amazing first or even second film within a trilogy, in this world we're setting up, but there's still so many classic and interesting characters within the Batman's rogue gallery, which could be brought to screen. So we have to go through Batman in detail and really visit a lot of his villains. I've already cast Ra's al Ghul, Black Mask, and even Joker, but there are still tons left, more than we can fit in one video. So for the next couple weeks, I'm going to be tackling Batman's villain in his rogue gallery. I'm going to focus on the villains that you guys are obviously requesting, so please let me know in the comments below who you'd like to see in the next video. But today we're focusing on some of my favorites, and actually the ones we've already seen on screen before, because I want to take these characters into a new light and into a different direction. I will be tackling the women of the Batman universe in a different episode, so that's why Catwoman and Poison Ivy won't be on this list. But for today, we're focusing on Scarecrow, Two-Face, Penguin, Bane, Riddler, and Mr. Freeze. So let's recast Batman. First up, we have Two-Face, and it seems fitting that Two-Face has been brought to screen twice before. I mean, both have their merits, but I still don't feel like the definitive version of this character has really been brought to that silver screen. Tommy Lee Jones hams it up, and Aaron Eckhart works well in the movie. What I mean by that is he's more of an instrument of the Joker and a thematic purpose than really being Two-Face. He works well in that Nolan universe and in the movie itself, but he doesn't really dive into that personality disorder, that schizophrenia. None of that's really translated. Now I think Two-Face should actually be a little bit of a mix of Jones and Eckhart and what they did. He doesn't need to be a lunatic, but he needs to be complex. That's why I went with Matthew McConaughey. And the main reason and purely why I selected him was for his wonderful performance in True Detective Season 1. He plays someone with a belief system, an interesting outlook on life.
If the only thing keeping a person decent is the expectation of divine reward, then brother, that person is a piece of shit.
But also someone who lives on the edge and really looks like he could crack or go insane at any moment. He could play both sides of this character, and he has a very unsettling nature, especially in True Detective. I'd prefer a more skinny, unnerving side that McConaughey has brought to the screen before, but still, I think he can bring complexity and that nature that we've seen from in the past.
You look in her eyes, even in a picture, and you know what you see? They welcomed it. And they saw in that last nanosecond, they saw what they were.
So Matthew McConaughey as Two-Face. Next up, we have Scarecrow. Now, Cillian Murphy's performance is severely underrated in my opinion. He does something really wonderful in Batman Begins. My first thought to replace him was Adam Driver, but after sitting with that choice for a while, I feel like he would bring that same unusual energy that Cillian brought to the role, and he'd almost be too similar. I mean, what's the point of bringing Scarecrow back to the silver screen if you're just gonna rehash what's been done before? That's why I went a different route and played more into the nightmarish version of Scarecrow, similar to what we've seen in the Arkham series. I want a character who can go full tilt and not just base his scenes in reality. I mean, he's the master of fears. That's why I'm with Jack Earl Haley. He is best known for playing Rorschach, where he does a very iconic voice for that role, which we could play into the nightmare scenes.
Your move.
But he's also played the literal man of nightmares, Freddy Krueger. That really sells me why he'd be great.
This dress was always one of my favorites.
He's also very skinny and has a really interesting look that can be played into. Definitely has that voice, but also I think he can clean up and appear as a professor of psychology. He's a really dynamic actor. Not only would he nail those nightmare scenes, but those slow dialogue driven scenes as well.
Afraid we're at an impasse.
We're at a what?
Impasse means we disagree without prospect of resolution.
So Jack Earl Haley as Scarecrow. Next up, we have Penguin. Now, with Penguin, it's difficult because Danny DeVito is Penguin in my mind. I grew up watching Batman Returns behind a blanket because Danny DeVito is just so wonderfully terrifying. He really inhabits that character. And my first thought of the character is really Danny, even before the comics. I'm really interested to see what direction Colin Farrell takes with this role, and he looks very interesting in it, but that's not how I see this character. I did think about Alfred Molina in this role, and I think he would have worked incredibly well in the Batman version of this. And maybe it's just DeVito in the back of my head, but for some reason I feel like it's very important that Penguin is a tiny man. I mean, according to the comics, he is normally just shy of 5 feet tall. And Colin Farrell and even Alfred Molina would give a very different feeling than how he's supposed to be approached. That's why my only choice for this is Toby Jones. He's 5'5" in real life, but feels even tinier on screen. In Penguin, we don't have to go full Danny DeVito. More, I'd like to see him as he was perceived in Sherlock, a grimy businessman who doesn't live with penguins, but makes you feel the same way about him. He can play the sleazy and uncomfortable nature that I think is required for this role.
Money, power, fame, some things make you untouchable. God save the Queen. She could open a slaughterhouse and we'd all probably pay the entrance fee.
So Toby Jones as Penguin. Next up we have Bane. Now, I may get some flack for this, but Tom Hardy's Bane was never my favorite. I'm a little hot and cold about Rises overall, but his version of Bane really never clicked for me. Now don't get me wrong, he's definitely a massive improvement over this. But with Bane, there's just so many ways you can go. Either way, I want to have that venom course through his body. I think it's something that's really important to his character. And in the same way, I think that venom should really change his appearance as well and affect the way he acts. That's why I went with David Bautista, who is best known obviously for the WWE and playing Drax within Guardians of the Galaxy, but I'm looking at his roles within Blade Runner 2049, where he obviously plays that dominating force on screen, but he actually has the talent to back this in terms of acting.
Plan on taking me in. Well, take a look inside.
He has shown what he can do in Guardians, and has shown he has the presence for something like this, but he also can be more subtle in roles. And it seems like his body's been taking a little bit of a beating over the years, which would give him that kind of worn down feel, which would be really interesting. I think he would give Bane an interesting dynamic, especially if the venom was taken away from him. So Dave Bautista as Bane. Next up we have Riddler. I know it's an unpopular choice, but he's my favorite Batman villain. And Paul Dano has always been my first choice to play the character. I am ecstatic that I'm going to see him on screen in The Batman, and can't wait to see what he does with the character. Now, I never disliked Jim Carrey in the role, and I actually have a soft spot in my heart for Batman Forever, but I'd like to see him a little bit more grounded. Paul Dano is that perfect choice, and I'd like to see him for his famously weird performance, especially in a role like Riddler. But a close second for me is definitely David Tennant. He could fit somewhere in the middle between what Dano's going to bring to the role and what Carrey did. Bring some of that psychotic nature, but also being able to give an understated performance if need be. He can definitely play that intellectual who plays games with Batman, someone who's more based in the shadows and more obsessive. I mean, look no further than him as Purple Man and Jessica Jones.
And again, how am I supposed to know? Huh? I never know if someone is doing what they want or what I tell them to.
Oh, poor you.
You have no idea, do you? I have to painstakingly choose every word I say.
I would like to see that kind of anger but toned down, played something that's a little bit more disturbed rather than very big. I think he could be great in this role. So David Tennant as the Riddler. Lastly, we have Mr. Freeze, the character I would like to see most on screen other than Red Hood. I love his backstory and really what drives this character. And if we're talking about characters who've been treated terribly in the past, I don't know if anything's worse than this.
All right, everyone, chill.
I mean, he might be the hardest to translate into a normal Gotham if you're going in that direction, but I feel like you could definitely spin this character to make it more grounded if you wanted to do that. Either way, I just like the idea of having a sympathetic character who you understand as a villain. And if you add an actor like Jason Isaacs in this role, you would have something really special. Jason Isaacs can play evil, as seen in the Harry Potter films, but also misunderstood. He has that voice and the screen presence to make this role turn from something ridiculous to something human and emotional. He brings complexity to the characters he's portrayed and subtlety in his performance.
It's here.
What?
I know who you see in the mirror. It doesn't matter what's real. What matters is how you feel. And I want to make you feel beautiful.
I think he can really nail this role and have the audience conflicted in the end who they side with. So Jason Isaacs as Mr. Freeze. So there is my part 2 on Batman villains. As I said before, comment below who you'd like to see next. We've got at least 2 more of these videos, so stay tuned to those. Please subscribe so you don't miss out on them. As always, thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.